This is Justin West from Podcast Portugal, offering a very warm welcome to our next guest, Stephen Regan from People of Lisbon. A very warm welcome to you, Stephen. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, and very excited for our talk today.
Thank you for having me on your podcast, and congratulations on your podcast.
All right, thank you.
What made you have the idea to start this?
Probably very similar to you, actually. It's a love for Portugal. You know, I'm here. I moved here 12 years ago, and I just felt like, well, I've got so much to talk about this place, and it's a really nice way to sort of network with a bunch of other interesting people as well, and to learn a little bit more about the place where you're living and where you intend to move and stay. And you know, and also share that love, really. It's...
Well, maybe another time we'll record another podcast where I interview you on your podcast about your story.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Except the only problem is I don't live in Lisbon. I'm not a physical resident of Lisbon.
Well, as I said again, it will be your podcast. I'll interview you on your podcast about how you ended up here and on your story. You know.
Okay, I guess.
Sounds like you've got quite a story.
Yeah, well, thank you. So tell me, how was People of Lisbon born? Let's tell the listeners a little bit about what you do, where you're from, how you ended up here, and People of Lisbon. How did you decide to make these really cool little video shorts?
Yeah, so I moved to Lisbon very, very spontaneously 4.5 years ago now, and I came here because of COVID. I had been living in New York for about 8 years, and when COVID happened, I had to leave New York, and I went back to my hometown of Dublin, where I was for a couple of months, and then I was really wondering what I was going to do with my life, and I discovered that there was only one flight out of Dublin Airport during those crazy times, once a week, and the only destination was Lisbon. I couldn't believe that actually when I saw it. At the time, if you put your mind back then, all flights were grounded and you weren't allowed to go outside and stuff. Yeah. But being the type of person that questions things, I was like, let me just look into that. And to my surprise, I found that there was a Ryanair flight leaving Dublin Airport every week to Lisbon. And so I didn't think about it at all. I just booked the flight and I got a one-way flight to Lisbon. So yeah, I arrived here with absolutely no plan, no idea what I was going to do. But at that time in the world, I don't think anybody knew what was going on. And but it was great arriving here in Lisbon at the time because there was no tourists. It was beautifully quiet, blue skies, and yet places were still kind of open, so you could still move around unlike other places in the world. And, I guess I felt like a bit of a king when I first arrived here. And I felt like this was I felt like a jammy bastard, so to speak, landing on my feet. So that was it. There was no plan. I didn't even know how long I was going to stay here, or if I literally just going with the flow. And a week after I got here, I just thought, right, I should. What am I going to do with myself? Yeah. And I don't know how you came up with your podcast title, but your podcast is called Podcast Portugal, which is a great name for a podcast. I'm a big believer in just naming something what it is.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted it Portugal Podcast, but someone had already taken it.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So the title, People of Lisbon, just popped into my mind, and I thought, it's hard times right now for people. So maybe what would be a positive thing that I could do? And I thought, well, why don't I try and make little documentaries about interesting people that live in Lisbon, and it will be called People of Lisbon. And so that was the basic concept at the very beginning. Yeah. And so what happened is that I met this great photographer in the first week or so that I'd moved to Lisbon. And
that is Rita, right? Rita
Ansone.
Yeah, same as my partner, Rita, the same name.
A lot of Ritas here, yeah.
There's a lot of Ritas.
So yeah, she's Latvian. She lives here, and I said, "Listen, why don't you take photographs to the people, and I'll make the little documentaries about the people." And we just didn't give it any much more thought than that. We just started doing it the next week. And our first person we ever featured was actually a comedian, goes by the name Andre de Freitas. And it's funny, he was putting on a comedy show during COVID times in the LX factory with everybody wearing masks and stuff, it's surreal. And but we've done it ever since. So we've done 173 episodes.
Joking, really?
We
That's
publish a new episode every Thursday.
yeah.
Our next video is coming out tomorrow, I suppose, whenever anyone's listening to this, every Thursday. And yeah, it's cool. I'm very proud of it. It's accidentally, it's been a great way to get to know people in the city. Every week,
Yeah,
my little social network opens up by one interesting person, and
yeah.
I guess I've become the Louis Theroux of amateur small time YouTube documentary
We
makers.
through what a great interviewer he was. I loved his
Yeah,
stories.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. You fall in love with the place, and the people are so welcoming. You just feel like a natural need to sort of give back and to help give voice to some of the businesses and local producers and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a really nice thing. But you're being very modest. I've checked out quite a few of your YouTube movies and stuff, and the editing is really quite cool. Really. So your background, you you came into film obviously trained, right? Because I can tell by your editing and all that kind of stuff and how you approach everything. It's definitely professional.
Well, thank you. I would never consider myself to be that professional. To be honest, I've said to you before we recorded this that I'm the least techie,
Yeah.
camera person in the world. I don't really know anything about cameras. I don't really know anything about microphones, and what I use is just a fairly straight. It's as simple a camera as you can get. I don't know what most of the buttons do anyway. And I've got a very small tripod which is quite battered and bruised. And I suppose I just make the most of a limited amount of ability, being humble. um,
Yeah.
and so our process is that we go and actually hang out with the person in question for 3 or 4 hours.
Mhm.
We kind of like capture a moment in time of their life, and I try and I ask any question that randomly pops into my mind. Sometimes they're very awkward questions for the people in the videos, but I'd like to try and loosen them up that way, by putting them on the spot. And so we end up with an hour and a half of footage, and that probably takes about 10 hours to cut down to a 5 or 6 minute video, which is
Mhm.
what appears on our YouTube channel, which is our main kind of thing. And then Rita posts her photographs to the Instagram, and recently we've had this bizarre thing where all our content has gone extremely viral on Instagram Reels and TikTok, which is great in a
Yep.
way because we've got this huge audience now that is suddenly coming to us. And now, slowly but surely, most people have seen something that we've done. Do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, they haven't seen these beautiful documentaries that I've crafted together, but
Okay.
they've seen a little snippet on Instagram, which is
Yeah,
which is
I've been
what
thinking
can you
about
say?
that because we're just audio here at Podcast Portugal at the moment. We've done a little bit of recording, but often, it's difficult to travel places and um, which I'd like to do a little bit more in the future. And I think like filming, you get a nice feeling of the person and the voice, the person behind the voice. And I think like in terms of like revenue, which is something we all have to kind of think about in some way. Um, it seems like doing these little reels and having some imagery and some voiceovers and stuff on Instagram and TikTok really seems to be capturing people's attention. So yeah,
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about revenue, but it has accidentally uh, kicked off for us on TikTok and Instagram as we've been posting reels.
yeah.
Uh, it's been an interesting thing to witness. It's interesting to witness when your content suddenly starts going viral. I've
Hmm.
been making content in one way or another for content. I hate that word, but I've been making stuff. It's about stuff
Interesting
is a better
stuff.
word. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been making stuff since I began, and it's very rare that something really kicks off that you do.
yeah.
Sometimes it does happen, but it's very rare that it does. So it's been
I,
interesting.
It did
Go
too.
ahead.
It has done for you before. Like Balcony TV was pretty cool, right? I love the concept of interviewing sort of bands on your balcony. uh,
Yeah, so in my previous life, well, yeah,
yeah,
the two things that kind of kicked off in my previous life is I went to film school and I made a short film called "They're Made Out of Meat,"
yeah.
um, and that surprisingly kicked off
So
online
let
with
me guess.
this.
I don't know that, but I can kind of tell from your idea of titles that it's sort of famous people, but they're real. Is that what that means?
No, it's a good guess though, but no, it was just a short film I made in film school, and it was about two aliens that meet in a diner late at night, and the main conclusion they come to is, as they discuss humans, is that they're made out of meat. Little did I know that the short story that I adapted into the screenplay was a quite popular short film. So anyway, the long story short, to this day, the film gets watched an awful lot of times on YouTube, and
Hmm.
so it's got a life of its own. And then
Okay, I
after
need to check
that,
that out. I need to check that out. I haven't seen that one yet.
yeah, they're made out of meat. And then after that, I really wanted to be a filmmaker and set myself went about writing a feature film script. Where are you from, actually?
Oh, originally, I'm from England, from the UK. I was actually born in Yorkshire, but I spent very, very little time in the UK. I was brought up in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, all
When I
right.
was younger, I went back to work there. Yeah, I have like a kind of international school accent, and I went back to boarding school in the UK for a little bit, and yeah, a little bit all.
I don't know why I thought you were going to say Melbourne or something like that for some reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a strange accent at school, but it's kind of strange because when I was at school in Saudi Arabia, it was an American school, so I was actually on the American embassy, and we all had American accents. We were all from all over the world, Australia, New Zealand, but we all had American accents. So I kind of don't understand why now that I have a few twangs of South African and sometimes I played a little rugby with New Zealand, a bunch of New Zealanders, but yeah, that always seems to kick into the accent every now. Like I just said there, accent. It always seems to kick
And
in every now and
you're
again, and I have I really don't know why. When you spend a lot of time in Portugal as well, and you speak to Portuguese people, if you're not speaking in Portuguese and you're speaking in English, you realize over time your accent changes a little bit. There is like an English accent here from Portugal,
Yeah. Well,
it's
sometimes I often get well, when I moved to New York and lived in New York for 8 years, but people have often said that I don't have a very strong Irish accent.
it's not the
And
Dublin isn't too strong. Yeah, you have a softer Dublin accent, I think.
yeah, I mean, it comes and goes depending on who I'm with and who I'm
Mm.
communicating with. But I always say it's like, I need to be understood. You know what I mean? So if I was to speak with a proper Dublin accent, you wouldn't have a clue what I was saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So sometimes people get disappointed that I don't have a strong Irish accent, but I'm a man of the
It's
world.
more of like a Liam Neeson type accent you have there.
Yeah, yeah, mid-Atlantic drawl. I think that's what they
Yeah,
call it
yeah,
sometimes.
that's it. That's it.
But anyway, so after film school, I wanted to make a feature film and went about like writing a script. But then one day I came up with this concept for a music website called BalconyTV, and the idea was that every day I'd film a different band on my apartment balcony in Dublin just for fun. This was in 2006. It was right when YouTube started, so the timing was just kind of bang on for that kind of concept. And yeah, we literally filmed a new band on our balcony every day, which is crazy to think, but every single day we did that. And to make a very long story short, people around the world started watching Balcony TV, and then they started contacting me asking could they start a Balcony TV in their own cities.
Wow.
And so we, over the course of 12 years, it took up 12 years of my life, and it became all encompassing.
Yeah,
And we ended up filming 20,000 shows of bands on balconies around the world, believe it or not.
that's crazy.
So it's mad when you look back, and I'm sure you're aware, I'm sure you feel this when you look back at parts of your life. You're like, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe there was a
Yeah,
person that did that. And now my life just seems so removed from that. But yet you were in, the different lives that we lead, I suppose.
yeah. Any
Yeah.
particular bands that we would know that we would that kind of be? I
Yeah.
mean,
So we Yeah, so we did, but ultimately we did balcony to be in 100 cities over the years, and what I learned was is that every country has its own music industry and its own local heroes, I suppose. So we had big names or relatively big names in all these different places, but I mean, I guess you have to be from some of these places to know who they are. But from a global level, we had Ed Sheeran on the balcony when he
Ah,
was
yeah. Okay, cool.
15 or 16 years of age before he was famous, and
Yeah,
Mumford and Sons before they were famous, and Jessie J before she was famous.
yeah.
We kind of specialized in getting people before they were famous or when they were coming down from being famous. You know what I
All
mean?
right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
how was you said Edge, right?
Say again?
Who did you say? Sorry, the first guy was it Edge?
Uh, no, Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran. Okay, sorry, I missed the last bit. How was he? How was he? How did he come
Well,
across?
he
Did
was only
you
50.
see that he was going to be something special?
He was only 15 or 16 years of age when he came to play in the balcony, and I actually filmed the performance of his. Um, and I, to be honest, I it was only a couple of years later where I realized that I'd filmed this performance of his because he was starting to go big. And yeah, I remember just thinking that's a very shy kid.
Yeah, yeah,
He's unlikely to go anywhere. You know what I mean? So it just goes to show you
yeah,
never know.
yeah, yeah. We're very different when we're teenagers. In fact, if you look back at your lifetime, you think I can't really remember being 15 or 16. You know, we're,
Yeah.
we're completely different people. Um,
What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I've kind of it's a difficult question, because like I was super into art. I really, really wanted. I was kind of really into writing. My father was really big into literature, and he used to just always encourage me to read really fantastic books, like the Dubliners, James Joyce, and a bunch of the French literature and stuff like that. So I was kind of a little bit into writing stuff and writing poems, and then I also was super into art, super into painting. I For every Christmas I used to get like an art book, that I used to just really treasure, and I used to love big abstract paintings, and so I still paint now, but I don't know. I've gone through like sort of peaks and troughs of working super hard at it and doing a lot, and then sort of taking 2, 3, 4 years off, and not painting at all. I've exhibited in some pretty cool places. In Lisbon, in the Urban Art Museum, I've got a few paintings in their permanent collection there. But I don't know. It's a weird one. I wasn't encouraged. My father used to encourage me a lot when I was younger to do these kind of things, but the world didn't feel like it encouraged. It felt almost impossible to follow that dream. It was always like, you know, maybe painting and going to Central St. Martin's. Like you're going to study painting and fine art and stuff, but then what are you going to do? It's like there's only expectation, like, I know you actually have to either go into teaching and teach art or to get a job, and I was always like, not, I think it was, I didn't have the confidence to believe and to like you did, really to sort of fall in love with what you did and then and just go for it. I was always like hedging my bets, like, okay, I'm going to also do some PE and maybe I can get a job doing that. Um, and
Well,
yeah,
I always think what well, my sense is now with like anything artistic is that you have to be doing it out of the love for it
yeah, exactly.
and the need to do it. You know what I mean? The love for it and the need to do it. And if you don't have those things, then you don't need to do it and you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
sometimes when people define themselves as an artist or that they start painting or whatever it is they do, that doesn't mean that that's what you have to do for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that it needs to define your whole person.
yeah, I think that was
Sometimes I
part of
have to
my
be good.
problem. I was either
Yeah.
or, I was either all in or I'd get cold feet and not quite be there, and I do I want to commit to that or do I want to do something else? I ended up falling into surfing, like I was at university. I left art school. I went and studied furniture design to be a little bit more safe, creative but safe. And then whilst I was at university, I started really getting into surfing and actually surfing, which I thought would never be my career, ended up being my career later on in life, which was really kind of crazy. And that in many ways brought me to Portugal. Um, and it's so funny because everybody wants, so many people want a job in surfing. And if you'd asked me like 30 years ago, what would you want to do? And I'd be like, well, I just want to go surfing. I don't really care about anything else. And and it just ended up being my career, which was kind of weird because then I stopped. Like I don't surf so much anymore because I work in surfing so much and train like professional athletes and stuff like that. But for me personally, like the whole surfing thing has kind of changed a lot, and there is quite a lot of aspects of it that when you turn it into a career, you get a little bit jaded in many ways. And I also felt like I spent so much time doing it that I kind of missed out on doing more of the art focus, and I missed out on traveling to places where there wasn't a beach and waves. Like maybe I should have gone and traveled to a few mountains and things like that, just to balance life out. So it's a kind of classic thing, like where you get super into something and then you're like, well, and I pull back a little bit going, no, 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 I don't want to go too much there because I'm going to sacrifice this. And I think really with doing this podcast, and right now I'm 51, 52, and I think, I don't have enough time and I don't have enough life to do all of the things I want to do. I really into doing the podcast and interviewing and talking to really interesting people. I do the painting, which is really cool. We have a farm in the Alentejo, which takes up a lot of our time growing food and doing the crops and the animals. Um, and also I have the surf coaching. So I have a few athletes that I look after. And it's kind of getting into a nice balance now where I'm doing sort of four things. They're all very different things, but I don't get too crazy with focus on one thing.
Man, you sound like you've got the dream life, in fairness.
Do I?
Everybody, anyone listening to this will be looking
God,
dream life. I
I
do a
just
bit of
feel like
surfing,
stretch.
I do a bit of art, I've got a farm.
Yeah, okay, that's nice of you to say. Yeah, I wish my bank balance would reflect that. Sometimes.
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it. Well, it's all perspective, I suppose, But I think it's even if you love something, once something becomes a job, then you kind of, I think if you're artistically minded, once something becomes a job, you're kind of slightly turned off by it. So even with People of Lisbon, I've always been like, oh God, if we could just get the sponsors, if we could just get funding to do this, then I could breathe happily, and life would be great, and I could just do the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
And then we've got a few sponsors, and then you're like, oh
Who,
God, we have
who
to
are who are your sponsors?
we have to deliver these things for the sponsors now.
Oh,
And
right. Okay. Yeah.
it's just you're kind of like, oh, now I have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So
It's a weird psychology. That is that. Do you think that is the creative spirit? You think that's what
I
we're
think
cursed with?
I recognize it within myself anyway. I don't know why it happens, but it's just, I suppose I want to be, I guess idealistically, I want to be free to do whatever it is that I want to do when I want to do it. And over the course of my life, in one way or another, I've somehow managed to do that. But but once, but I've needed to figure out ways to survive, and that's been a struggle. But it is interesting when you do get the breaks, how the high of the financial break is somewhat temporary, and then the requirements to deliver for the whoever it is that's financing it is, I don't know, it's kind of a turn off. I don't know, but that's just, what can you do? That's life.
Yeah. I get what you mean for sure. Like, and also you get that thing where you get that strange thing in life as well, where you do have to struggle a little bit to really appreciate those moments where you get a little bit of relief from the struggle. And that helps you focus a little bit. And then, you know, I don't know. I'm reading a lot about like you sort of had an interview recently. I can't remember who it was, but it was you were talking a lot about Lisbon's sort of multicultural identity. And what is your take on that? And I mean, it's saying that it's at the moment we are seeing kind of a lot of stuff happening around the world. um, multiculturalism in many ways is an interesting concept, and I know that I see a lot of posts of people complaining about certain groups and other groups, and immigration becomes a big issue, and all of these things. And I worry sometimes about this kind of stuff. I mean, I've been living all over the world, and I, I see a lot of benefits in everybody. In my opinion, we all have very very similar needs and very similar wants, and it seems to be sometimes that the powers that be want to try to group us and to pitch these groups against each other. And Lisbon in Portugal is such a welcoming place. The people here have always, I felt very welcome. And what do you think about Lisbon's multicultural identity? And do you think like this is at risk in many ways?
It's a big topic. It's a
Just
big
drop
topic, and
bomb on you.
it's a big topic. It's a complex topic. So many different ways you can look at it, and so many different perspectives you give on it. And I suppose just in terms of my own journey, when I arrived into Lisbon 4.5 years ago, and the concept of what we do is really as simple as like, I'm going to make interesting documentary or little documentaries about interesting people that live here in Lisbon. And the initial idea was actually that we would make these kind of quaint little documentaries about, like the shoe cleaner on Rocio or the tram driver, these kind of nice, about the local Lisboetas.
Yeah.
But very quickly, the videos became about all the different types of people that live here in Lisbon and all the interesting people that live here in Lisbon, because Lisbon is just like now like jam packed full of, the most interesting people in the world are flocking to Lisbon right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we do try to have a very strong mix of Portuguese nationals and expats that live here. Although sometimes people look at our content and just automatically assume that we only make videos about expats, and that's not true at all. But that is the assumption that people sometimes make. Having said that, I have become more aware of the frustration of the average Lisboeta, if you will, for the influx of people that are coming into the city from all over the world, especially from wealthier countries that are, taking over the buildings, redeveloping the city, etc., etc. And they complain that they can no longer afford to live in the city and the prices are going up and stuff. And I mean, I think that's completely justifiable frustration that anybody in their right minds that is from somewhere might feel. So I can understand that, and I'm not the one to restructure the world's economics, but unfortunately, I don't think any city has ever escaped that. Like, I'm from Dublin essentially, and Dublin was a very poor city, very rundown city. In fact, Dublin had absolutely nothing going on whatsoever until the very early 90s. And then in the early 90s, it all kind of took off, and redevelopment and culturally the city started going off, U2, the Cranberries, Riverdance, whatever you want to name it, the football team, everything Irish became successful in the 90s. Pierce Brosnan, an Irishman, was James Bond, for God's sake.
I went to school with his
And
son, actually.
there you go. And Dublin went through it, and I lived in New York, and I guess New York has always been in a state of, redevelopment, people moving in there from all over the world. And so Lisbon has just become a city which the whole world has suddenly discovered. It's the new discovery. A few years ago it was Berlin or something like that. Now it's Lisbon.
But
And
what
Lisbon, I
is,
think,
and
yeah.
you've gathered this kind of from the guys that you've been interviewing, and or is it just a sort of general feeling and a sense?
No, that's just my sense really, and it's just very much my sense. Like, Lisbon reminds me of, it's become the Williamsburg of Europe. It's Williamsburg is a part of New York, which is kind of like where all the hipsters, the cool, rich hipsters,
That where Andy
move to.
Warhol was, no? Was it Andy
Yeah,
Warhol?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like all these kind of cool, kind of artsy types. You know what I mean? But live in very nice, fancy kind of warehouse
Mhm.
spaces. But Lisbon has become that discovery. And when I speak to people from Lisbon, they say how, like, it's not that far, a lot, like 10 years ago, like things have changed so dramatically, so fast for them. And I'm talking about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even, but 10 years ago, certainly, Lisbon just didn't have that much going on. And so now there's just construction going on everywhere. Everywhere's been turned into fancy Airbnb apartments. The place is completely crowded. Well, the center part, certainly, it's completely crowded with tourists, like it's a tourist mecca. But I will say this, every city is like that. Having traveled a lot, every city is like that. Um, and then they've got, immigration from, different, ethnic groups from around the place. And it's just very hard to know how I just think that's just the way it goes. Until somebody comes up with some very, very dramatic solution, I can't see any way around it. And I also have like a philosophical outlook that, certainly from somebody when it comes to like city life, let's say. So, when you think about when an Irish person, a Dublin person would think about Dublin, there's a kind of a motto in Dublin, Dublin in the rare old times. You think nostalgically back to Dublin in the 70s and the 60s and stuff, when things were desperately poor. There's kind of a romanticism that you put towards those times. And you could say the same thing for New York. Like New York was like in the 70s and the 60s and, had like
Times
a kind of,
Square was crime ridden.
yeah, had like a dirty kind of romance to it. You know what I mean? You could just keep on imagining like Robert De Niro driving a taxi cab and
Yeah. I
the
think it's
mafia
probably
like
what
knocking
attracts
off
people
people.
there. A lot of it, that kind of feeling, that kind of it probably attracts people there. And as they grow older, the city grows older with them.
Yeah, and so that's what it was. That's what it was like nostalgically, but that doesn't mean that it was actually better. You know what I mean? Like because it was tougher to live and things were kind of, I don't know, maybe more simple in certain ways. It doesn't mean that they were better. So now like Lisbon is having is going through a boom in terms of investment coming in terms of like things being redeveloped, in terms of the whole atmosphere of the place changing. And I presume that that leads to frustration from Lisboetas, especially those who are struggling to make ends meet, because it is very difficult to make money in this country. There's no question about that, especially if you're an artist or a creator like you and me. Like not every expat that lives in Lisbon is a real estate developer, although there is an awful lot of them that seems to be doing that right now. So I understand the frustration and I completely empathize with them. I don't know what to say. It's just unfortunately the fact that everyone's kind of going, "Hey, Lisbon is really cool. Let's go to
Yeah.
Lisbon."
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
what can you do?
it's got, I mean, I often ask this question to people, and quite frankly, a lot of the high proportion of the answers are like, well, it's, what don't you have? You have like a beautiful city, very quaint, nice, interesting buildings and alleyways and kind of little bars and a nice kind of town atmosphere in a city. And it's right next to a beautiful river and a beautiful estuary and beaches right there. You have the weather. It's a kind of no brainer in many ways. And I
Yeah,
can,
Lisbon's got like so many dynamics to it. I've always said that Lisbon's one of these places where there's always something new to discover around every corner. And you'll walk by a building 100 times, and then one day you'll decide to walk into it, and then it will reveal itself as being some kind of giant palace or a big courtyard with a cool cafe or something.
yeah.
And you'll be like, "Ugh," you feel stupid that you haven't walked into it for the last 100 days in a row.
Yeah,
And
I fully agree with you. I've actually found a little bit like Portugal is like that. You go to once you've been to one place, you then discover another area, then you go to another area, and it's just like, how do I not know? How have I lived here for 12, 14 years and not ever known that that castle existed there, and the
yeah,
story
and so
behind that castle?
so my defense of Lisbon must be sometimes along the way. I saw this video, for example, recently on YouTube, just the weekend. Some big YouTuber was in Lisbon, and he made a video about the immigration and the problems with immigration and how the city now looks like a mess in the center because it's just like run over by immigration and stuff. And I was really frustrated watching the video because he basically was walking down one street bang in the center. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose if you watch that video from an outsider, you might be tempted to think, "Oh, look at Lisbon! It's all it has is just rampant tourists and people selling stuff on the street." You know what I mean? But yes, if you walk down that one street, then that's what you're going to get down that one street. But the reality is that Lisbon, with a little bit of a walk in various different directions, you will find a beautiful park, a beautiful water feature, solitude. It's all there to be found. Having traveled the world again myself, like I was always the type of person that, if I saw a queue, I would just walk in the opposite direction, or wherever the tourists were, I just walk in another direction. And you'll find that you'll basically have the same thing that all the tourists have, but 5 minutes away, and there's nobody else there, and you have it to yourself. It's amazing how tourists and stuff just flock to the same street or the same arch or something. But you can still find beautiful pockets of Lisbon all over that are not, taken over by tourists and expats and that kind of thing. You just have to have a sense of
It's an
um
adventure.
yeah, or just wander about a bit.
Yeah.
But Lisbon's a fantastic city, and it is interesting as well. But it is nevertheless interesting how these endlessly fascinating, interesting people are now moving to Lisbon.
Mm.
And so with People of Lisbon, I guess one thing that our video series is one thing that it features. It kind of demonstrates some of these people. So, for example, we just made a video recently about this guy who was, I'm always amazed how these people that you can find. His name is Mitchell Kriegman, and he was a former Saturday Night Live writer in the 80s.
Ah.
And he actually got
Oh, no,
fired.
I've heard of it. I think maybe I've seen it on your one of your posts. I was thinking I've heard of that guy.
Yeah, we're going to start having overlap now. I can tell we're going to have overlap on
Yeah,
on your podcast and my video series.
yeah.
But yeah, Mitch, he's cool. You should definitely get him onto your podcast. He'd be a really great interview, and I'll have to introduce you. But yeah. So he was a Saturday Night Live writer in the 80s, and he actually got fired from Saturday Night Live, uh, while they were recording the show, which is an incredible story in itself. And but he went on to work for Nickelodeon and created a bunch of their biggest TV shows in the 90s. And so now he lives in Lisbon, and he's this like a wonderful character, what I mean, with all these wisdom and stories and showbiz stories and stuff. And I was just dying to pick his brains about everything. But it's an example of like you never know who's
Who
just
ended up
living
here?
around the corner. Previous to that, we had made a video about this guy called Lachlan Bailey, and Lachlan is essentially
Ah,
the biggest
yeah, yeah.
Vogue photographer in the world. And he's photographed everyone from
I think
Julia Roberts to Brad Pitt to you name it.
and the guy, the guy who was Indiana Jones. Jesus Christ, I just forgot.
Harrison Ford, yeah, he just
Harrison
photographed
Ford with a
Harrison.
pot of whiskey. Yeah, I saw that. A beautiful photo.
So, so I guess, yeah. What I'm saying is that the good thing about our videos is it really showcases the crazy variety of people that call Lisbon home. And the interesting people is just there's endlessly interesting people that are here.
Yeah, I mean, who else in particular really sort of stands out that some really crazy stories that come to mind?
Yeah, well, so we've made 173 videos, and we try and find interesting individuals all the time. We did a video recently about this hairdresser called, his name is Anthony Millard. He's got this kind of Mick Jagger like aesthetic to him.
Yeah.
He's an Englishman that moved here 30 years ago to
Wow.
be a DJ, I think, in the Algarve, but he ended up becoming a hairdresser, and now he's got the most rock and roll hair salon in Lisbon. And but he's just his when you see him walking down the street, he's got a completely unique vibe to him.
Hmm.
We did a video, for example, about a really cool belly dancer here. She's a tattoo artist and belly dancer. She's got this striking red hair, like from the movie Run Lola Run.
Yeah.
Um, she comes to mind. We got to go backstage with her as she was about to perform on a show, and it was spectacular. One of our videos in its own right. We did a football agent called Guilherme von Cooper, and Portuguese football agent, and we actually did the video with him like right during the transfer window, which was just before the summer or at the end of the summertime. And yeah, remember we filmed it on a scorchingly hot day. So, but each one of these videos, like each one of these people, requires a different. You have to adapt. You'll find yourself as you're doing these podcasts. I'm sure you've already found it's like different people bring different energies, you know what I mean? And you need to adapt your own energy a little bit to to make them comfortable in the space that they're being interviewed with, you know? And all these people come with their different egos, and everyone's focused on their own thing that they're doing in their life, and, and everyone
Yeah.
and so that's kind of interesting. We did this amazing chef, who's like one of the top chefs in Lisbon, Chef Vitor, and he had all these tattoos and real rock and roll, like fuck you persona, which I really liked. Kind of like the Anthony Bourdain
Yeah.
of Lisbon chefs. We did a video about the biggest comic book store owner in Lisbon. There's just, I mean, it could go on and on. We've done 170. I guess one video that comes to mind that was really cool was we did a video of this Portuguese man, beautiful gentleman who flew for TAP Airways for 40 years. He was a pilot for TAP, and he's become the aviation expert. uh, Whenever there's an aviation incident, he will be brought on to television here to
You
give
know
his
what?
expert knowledge.
I think I've actually spoken with him before. I can't recollect his name, but that really rings a bell.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. Wonderful man, and Jose Correa Guedes, I think is his name. And so he's written all these books in aviation as well. And he's got these incredible stories. Like, for example, once his plane was hijacked when he was flying it, I think in the late 70s or early 80s. And this kid came into the cockpit with a gun and, threatened to down the plane. And, I said, when I was interviewing him, I was like, oh, how many people were on the plane? And I think there was like 120 people on the plane. And I said, you must have been terrified. And he said, yeah, no, it was pretty terrifying. And I said, how did you resolve this? And he said, oh, well, we had to like talk for about 6 hours in the cockpit, you know what I mean? And he said, but I ended up kind of, sympathizing with the kid. And when the kid was in court, I decided to go in and defend him.
Oh, well, no
You
way,
know,
really.
I was like, what? And he's like, yes. And no, it's like, now it's 45 years later. He's like, now me and we've been friends ever since. And he's like, in fact, I went for Christmas dinner.
No, no way.
The hijacker is now 60, and I guess he's like 80 or something like that. Pilot Jose. And so he's like, yeah, that's the Portuguese ways. We become friends with our hijackers, So that's
Interesting Christmas dinner topic. Oh, how do you guys know each other?
yeah, incredible story. And he flew the Porto team that won the Champions League, so Jose Mourinho and stuff. And so he's got great photographs of him and the Champions League trophy, and yeah, amazing life story. And so, I like all of our videos, but every so often there's one that just has a real nice character that just kind of, you know, shines in a special kind of a way. You know what I mean?
It goes back to one of the questions you asked me, like, why did I decide to do this podcast? And it just occurred to me. I remember one of the thoughts that I had. Uh, I have quite a few clients that come from sort of Northern European countries and all over to do surf coaching sessions. And a lot of the time I'll be sort of asking them, okay, so I always sort of breach that question. So what do you do when when you're back at work, and, how much time do you have to train and all that kind of stuff? And it always fascinates me because it opens up a whole sort of new story and dimension of their life, and everybody, when they come surfing in Portugal, they have that sort of feeling of relaxation and release and everything. And so it makes me always curious, sort of what got them to that point. And I just came to realize that so many people that you would probably feel come from quite ordinary jobs, maybe, or well, I say ordinary jobs because that's presumptuous of me. What I thought was ordinary jobs actually end up to be so fascinating, and what you think is just normal is not really normal, and I realized, just speaking to people, and that how fascinating these stories were, and how interested I was in their life and what got them to this point. And usually what gets them to the point of learning to surf, or surfing in the first place, especially later on in life, is like a kind of they want to make some radical change to their life. You know, they've been stuck in a rut, or they feel the pressure of or family or the breakup of a relationship. But you end up sort of not only coaching them how to surf, but quite often coaching their life. You know, and it just occurred to me that these stories were so interesting. Just people's stories, just really resonate with me. You know.
Yeah, well, I guess everybody has a story, I suppose. That's what some people say. But I think, Lisbon and Portugal, you know, I discovered pretty quickly here has clearly become an escape for people that are at a crossroads in their
Mm.
lives, and they've sought refuge in Portugal and Lisbon. Lisbon, I noticed when I came here pretty soon is that there is a certain amount of woo woo here. you know, there's a
Yeah, yeah,
certain amount of people are liking their yoga retreats and
yeah, 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 yeah.
there's kind of a lot of
It's huge. It's massive.
fanciful drug usage. People are
Yeah, yeah,
doing all these drugs that I've never even heard of before.
yeah.
Hipster drugs, you know what I mean? And people are having
Ayahuasca.
tantric ayahuasca, tantric sessions. It's all happening here.
As a friend of
Um,
mine said, he went up into the hills in the Algarve and said, "Oh, I did an ayahuasca ceremony, and I felt like I kind of just reset my whole personality, and everything was torn away." And I said, "Jesus Christ, man, that sounds terrible." No, he said it was
yeah,
the most enlightening experience that I've ever had, and I was like, "Man, that sounds terrible," you know?
it would be a nightmare to me. But clearly, a lot of people
Yeah.
go for that, and I mean, very much first world problems, I suppose, as well.
So, what do you think
That
they're searching? What do you think people are searching for? What do you think what do you think they're going to find here?
Well, there's an awful lot of people that are coming from America, of
Mm.
course, and a lot of these people are, when you ask them why they came from America or why they came here, they will cite the political landscape in Portugal or in the
Really?
United States as something that they want to get away from. Yeah, like a lot of them are just very like anti-Trump, and
Mm.
then a lot of them will go like, oh, wanted to get away from the crime and I was afraid of bringing up my children in the crime situation of America and stuff. So these are the kind of rationales that people give.
Mhm.
Um, so there's an awful lot of people in their mid to late 40s that are moving here, or early retirement people that I find are moving here from the States. Um, so I mean, what's not to love in fairness? Like if you do have a certain amount of money, what is not to love? It's very affordable by other places' standards. It's sunny 300 days a year. You're close to everything really, and I could see how that's appealing to anybody that discovers it. Unfortunately, everybody is discovering it, and that's the problem at this moment in time.
Yeah,
So even because when I'm looking for people to feature on People of Lisbon, like there's various different ways that I go about looking for people, and one thing that I do is I look through Facebook groups.
okay.
There's loads and loads. There's endless Facebook groups for anything that you're kind of maybe interested in. There's Digital Nomads Facebook group, and there's Working Remotely Facebook group Lisbon, and there's just move to Lisbon Facebook. There's endless groups, and so I just keep a general scan over these things just to see if anybody pops up that might look interesting and somebody maybe feature in our videos. And but as I'm doing that, I'm noticing how many people just seem to be arriving here every single day, and they're all kind of like posting similar kind of things, but they're all very naive and very
Yeah, me
well.
and my friend are looking for somewhere to rent in Lisbon for 650 euros a month. Is always the one that
Yeah, well,
opens
yeah, well,
up. You comments for
the,
like, yeah, good luck.
the, Well, see this is the whole thing. It is possible to get places for that. This is what I find interesting. When
Mm.
people complain about, that you can't afford to live in Lisbon anymore and the prices are gone up. Well, the prices are only gone up depending. It all depends on what it is that you're looking for. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I've managed to get a decently affordable rent for my whole time living in Lisbon. So and I'm not living in lap of luxury or anything like that, but I have managed to live in nice places in Lisbon. So I'm often wondering, like, what exactly are people looking for in terms of what they're looking for. I saw a post, for example, yesterday on Facebook where somebody went, we're thinking about moving to Lisbon. Can we live affordably there for 4,000 a month? And I'm just like, what? Like what? Like what? Like I was tempted to message the person and say, give me $1,000 a month. I will be
And
your
I'll sort it
personal.
all out for you. Yeah.
Also, I'll be your butler. I'll massage your feet every morning and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so it really all depends on what you're looking for. Like, I have spoken to people who are in the real estate world who are buying property and stuff. Apparently, property is as expensive here as it is elsewhere. Well, I suppose I'm not really thinking that way, so I don't really need to worry about that. But apparently, property prices are expensive. But in terms of rentals, I needed a new place to live as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, and I mean the places are there if depending on what it is that you want. Now, if you want a nice big apartment to yourself with like 2 or 3 balconies and like an extra spare room and stuff, then yeah, it's going to cost you a bit more money, I suppose. But if you need a room somewhere in a decent location in the city, then
It's
they're there to
relative,
be
I guess.
found.
It's relative.
Totally relative. And I've lived in like bang in the center of
New
Lisbon.
York.
I currently live just off Avenue Liberdade, which is the
Oh, wow.
fanciest,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is like the Champs Elysees of Lisbon. And I've managed to find a place where I'm renting a room for 700 a month. Now,
Mhm,
700 a month sounds like an awful lot of money actually to a Lisboeta
mhm,
or to a certain kind of Lisboeta. And it might sound like an awful lot of money to somebody who's lived in Lisbon like 5 or 6 years ago, where apparently you could rent a place for 250 quid or something.
yeah, yeah.
But from my point of view, it's like, okay, wait a second. I'm living in the fanciest area in the city.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Right next to, the boulevard with the cascading green trees and the beautiful outdoor kiosks. And it's like, I mean, I don't know what people are expecting. You know what I mean? That seems pretty reasonable to me under the circumstances. Now, you have to be kind of clever in terms of how you look around for places and stuff. Um, but where there's a will, there's a way, I think, in terms of that stuff. At the moment, I mean, let's jump forward 2 years' time, the outlook could be a lot more different. But
Mm.
for the moment, I think it's still possible to get affordable rents, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah, we've
Um,
definitely seen like a move for people looking for more space, like we lived in Ericeira for a while, which is just 30 minutes north of Lisbon, and we found like, the prices and the property went pretty crazy there, and so many families moving in. I think literally it's really similar to Lisbon, and in terms of people wanting to stay there. There's really good schools, but the prices were just in pretty challenging if you wanted to move a family there, in terms of buying property and that. So,
Yeah,
um,
so I guess I'm very much coming from the point of view of
rentals.
somebody who's an individual, say, and I moved here as an individual. I had no attachments, no
Yeah.
children, no responsibilities, and I suppose if you're in that position in life, then it's obviously easier to maneuver around. If you got family and you need somewhere bigger and more spacey and stuff, and it never ceases to amaze me how much proper adults do spend on stuff. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
say that as a 42-year-old man child, or
Yeah.
maybe just a child.
Yeah.
But I was speaking to somebody recently here who was telling me about how much money he's spending to send his kid to school, and I
Mm.
was like, "What?" I was like, my brain couldn't even compute it. I was like, "You pay what to send your kids to school?" And people look at me like I've got 16 heads. So they're like, "Yeah, of course, that's how much you spend." So I'm like, I don't understand how anybody does any of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but I don't know. I presume you can send your kids to like public schools here, and they can just muck it up with the Portuguese kids and learn the language properly and stuff. But it seems like people that are moving here are sending their kids to like kind of fancy international schools, and that's probably the reason why it's expensive. That's my guess. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely a big growth in that kind of international school arena. I mean, we send our kid, Martin, when he was younger, he went to in Portugal. They have some schools which are half and half. They're sort of half private, half public. So the public either fund them, or it's kind of interesting setup. So he went to sort of a private school, which was also funded in many ways by the local government. Now he just goes to the normal little local government school, and it's right in the countryside. He gets picked up by a taxi every morning that's organized by the local camera, the local council, and he gets driven to school in his own taxi, which he's very happy about. And the little school has it's all been renovated. It's one of those traditional primary Portuguese primary schools, but it's all been newly renovated, newly painted. It's got a really nice football pitch and brand new playground and everything on the outside. And the teachers work super hard, super nice, super conscientious. They all went on a bus that was organized by the local mayor. A really nice big bus that took them all into Lisbon and took them all around the Gulbenkian museum. And he had just a wonderful time, and I just think, wow, I they really do. The some things here, like our little local camera, really does quite a good job in providing the schools and providing things for the kids. I mean, there isn't many cities you'd go to in the world where, for example, in our area we have our nearest city, although it's a long way away, is called Beja, and in the summertime, I don't know how much you know about Alentejo, but it gets really hot. It's like 44, 46. And they converted. I think it may have been an old mine. It's kind of quite a mining area where we live, and I think it was an old quarry or something. They converted into a lake, into a barrage, and they created a big like beach, parking, beautiful like cabanas and everything. And they don't charge you for it. You can just park up, take a picnic, go there, sit on the beach, go swimming in the water, and then you know anywhere else in the world that they'd be charging a hefty fee for people to go use that facility. Here in Portugal, in the Alentejo, it's a completely provided. And I don't think often people quite appreciate that.
Since we've started posting since our Instagram reels and our TikToks have started going viral, one of the reasons why they've been going viral is that no matter what somebody says in these Instagram reels that we post, because essentially what we do is we take out little teeny nano clips of our video content, we post them on Instagram, but it doesn't matter what anybody says, you'll just get a flood of people that just negatively respond to
Yeah,
whatever they say. So you could get somebody to say like, "Oh, the sky is blue," and just immediately 100 people go, You don't know what you're talking about. It's not blue.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just people think that it's blue, but they're complete fucking idiots." And you're like, Jesus Christ, people, relax. You know
yeah.
what I mean? But and one example would be is the transport system in Lisbon. I've spoken to various people about the transport system in Lisbon. I personally think the transport system in Lisbon is great.
Yeah, yeah,
I find the metro is unbelievably fast and reliable and comes along every 2 minutes, every
yeah,
3 minutes. The bus is pretty good as well, and at the same regard, the bus has got Wi-Fi on it. The train stations, the metros are very clean and stuff. The boat goes across the water every 20 minutes, on time. The train at Cascais goes every 20 minutes on the dot. Do you know what I mean? Um, the train from Lisbon to Porto is very regular and is a very nice trip, and all these things are very nicely affordable.
yeah.
Now, I must be missing something. I'm sure there's gaps here. I'm sure if you're outside the city, it's not great or something like that. Blah blah blah. But for me, that's pretty good. And I have spoken to Portuguese people who get visibly angry at the transport system when you go like, I should think it's pretty good. They're like, oh, you got no idea, it's the worst thing ever. And so I was like, well, I don't think you've lived in other cities. I don't think you've lived in New York City where it is terrible. Where there's rats in the subway. We think about the New York subway, it was the kind of thing, but there's rats there. You know what I mean? It's horrific issues down there. And transport in Dublin's not great. I think people just how often just come to resent or hate the place that they live. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
they like having something to complain about, no matter
You
where
think
it
it,
is that
you
you
think it's
live.
a kind of cultural identity, maybe to be a little bit
No,
modest,
I
a
think it.
little
I
bit
think it's
more.
the same in Dublin. I think it's the same in every city. I think everybody likes to complain about the place where they are, and they can't see the woods from the trees. It's like, you're spoiled. Again, I can't really, I can understand that the Lisbon weather is really struggling because they work long hours and they get paid almost nothing. And so, or they get paid very, very little. So life is a complete struggle for them. They don't make enough money to be able to afford rent in their own city. Like I totally, like you can't argue with that. That's completely legitimate gripe, you know what I mean? But just
Mm.
parking that a little bit, there's still an awful lot of good stuff in Lisbon to at least be positive about. You know what I mean? You'd again, the weather is just unbelievable. You're very, very close to the beaches. You can go for a beer for €2. You can have a coffee in the morning time for like 120 or 110 or cheaper than that if you know where to go. And you know, yeah, you can't have it all, I suppose. You can go see a movie, all right? There's a cinema around the corner from me. It's called Cinemateca. It's kind of like it shows loads of old movies and stuff. Currently, it's got Western season on.
Mhm.
They often have big famous filmmakers come along and do talks. Woody Allen was here last year,
Mm.
and it's €3 to go see a movie there. And I often, like when the weather gets really hot, what I'll do is I'll break up my day. I'll just escape into Cinemateca and go see whatever movie is showing. And it'll be some kind of old classic movie or some obscure movie that I haven't seen from the 70s or something like that, for €3. And then it's got a beautiful big courtyard with a cafe and stuff. And it's just like happy days. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like if you were in New York, going to see a film would be like 15 to €20. You know what I mean? Never mind the popcorn and Coke. The same goes for Dublin for that matter as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's certainly like a interesting thing. Like people's take on. I often wonder with you were talking about like Instagram and stuff and people's comments. I don't know whether it's people just like to vent frustrations of life and or whether there was some sort of nefarious reasons why that's happening. Is there some sort of I don't know nefarious entity kind of putting these comments like thousands of bots out there trying to persuade us to be more negative about things.
Well, it's so I do understand. So again, when people just glance at our Instagram posts or Instagram reels, they just automatically think that everybody is foreign or from another country, and so therefore they're just ready to type negative stuff no matter what happens. So no matter what the person is talking about, people will just write in and will just write and go like, "Get out of our country! Get out of our country!" You know what I mean? You're ruining their countries. It doesn't really matter what the person's talking about. They just want to use it as a platform to vent that kind of spleen. But just as a wider topic, it has been interesting to just see like the angry negativity that people post on social media. It's horrific. It's absolutely and utterly horrific. Like you would never, ever, ever, ever remotely dream to say some of these things to people in the real world. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah,
never would do it. You know what I mean? And the fact that anybody feels that it's okay to write things like this, addressing a person who, because all these people that we feature, I mean, nobody's got overtly bad intentions in their heart. Do you know what I mean? And
mhm.
most of them are just doing the best for themselves and trying to get by and things like that. Do you know what I mean? And it's like you don't know their lives and stuff like that. And
That's what makes me realize whether it's actually real. Whether these comments actually come from real people, because I just can't. You see the quantity of them, and it's always it,
but they
it
breed
just creates.
they breed negativity. So what happens is that somebody writes a comment, somebody comes in aggressively with a negative comment, and then what happens is somebody immediately comes in and to argue with that person who comes in with a negative comment, and then they just spiral into negative comments, argument that goes on like for days. And it's fantastic for viewership because it
Yeah,
makes our metrics go up, blah, blah,
actually
blah.
turns into a positive. Double two
But,
negative to make a positive, right?
but what's horrible about it is the content that we're putting out there. We're just trying to put out essentially uh like positive, like colorful kind of like positive videos about people doing things. And there's certainly no maliciousness in terms of what we're doing. And it's interesting that the positivity breeds negativity, and then the negativity breeds negativity upon negativity. It's just interesting to
Yeah.
witness that. And I've had
It
people that
helps it
message me
helps your
direct.
positive message spread though, which is kind of which is kind of very super interesting.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's a very strange world we live
Mhm.
in. Very, very strange world. And it is something to think about. It does make you kind of wonder, like, is this so I have actually I just don't pay attention to the comments anymore, you know. Just don't. And every so often I will quickly scan on them. I will have a very quick scan, and if they are really toxic, then I'll just switch off to commenting on that particular post, you know. Which feels kind of like, you know, because I don't want to deprive people free speech and stuff, or feel like I'm cutting down things just because people are writing negative things. Because I suppose there's nothing particularly wrong with people if they're having a debate, I suppose. But it
Yeah,
just
I mean,
at certain points you have to be kind of like conscious of, especially the people that are in the content, the people that are in the videos. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
they've
yeah.
given their time, and all of a sudden there's all this huge negativity flowing their way.
It's a difficult
And
one, isn't it? It's the conundrum of free speech, right? Like, I mean, I quite hard line on, people can write something to me, and I really won't care, you know. Um, but some people are sensitive to that. The written word can be hurtful. I don't know how, because I don't feel that way, and I feel people have the right to kind of write whatever they want, even if it's the most horrendously terrible thing, because people see it for what it is. The majority of people just say, "Well, that's just a ridiculous thing to say," and give no attention to it, you know. Or if they do give attention to it and try to offer a better argument, then you know, gives them an opportunity to formulate their ideas and perhaps change the other person's. But yeah,
but
I don't
we're
know.
all we're all not made out of the same thick skin like you and me, shall we say? But also,
Yeah.
like it is interesting as well as that. So, for example, if you go back in time to my original short film that I made, that I spoke about at the beginning of the podcast, you know, that video film has been watched, like, let's say 2 million times on
Hmm.
YouTube, and, like, you know, 99.9% of the comments are all like glowing and appraisal of the film. But actually, it's only the negative ones that kind of that kind of make you go like, wait a second, what's this person saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like the negativity kind of like piques your can sometimes pique your interest more than just like glowing praise, you know? So it seems like people respond to, because what I often say to people who are in our videos, I'm like, listen, you know, I don't think you've noticed all the likes that the video got. The likes have given, like, there's been 10,000 people that have liked the video, and so like 20 people have written these like relatively stupid negative comments. You know what I mean?
But
But
do they
people just,
genuinely do they say to you, "Oh, I'm genuinely upset by what that person's typed"? Do they actually sort of comment on that?
yeah. So at the beginning, so I'm talking almost exclusively about our Instagram posts and our TikToks. You know what I mean? And you know, I have to be aware of the people in the videos. I don't want, we're not trying to make anybody look bad, so we definitely can't be having, you know, just a huge amount of negative feedback directed towards a person who's got no intention to upset anybody. You know what I mean? Like, for example, we did this video a few months ago of this woman she's literally an art historian. Okay, an art historian, top of the top, like, tier art historian. She knows more about everything than anybody else. You know. And her particular speciality is Chinese porcelain, if I recall. Chinese porcelain, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so in the video that we made about her, she was speaking about how you know, the Portuguese tiles, you know, have got some kind of lineage with like ancient Chinese porcelain. You know what I mean? That they're linked to some degree. The blue and white is linked, or, you know, blah blah blah. Like, she would know. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody's going to have this knowledge within their head, it's her. And, you know, she's also like curated, you know, various art exhibitions here, and she's written books on this subject matter and stuff. So we posted like a tiny clip on our Instagram of her going, "Yeah, you know, you can draw a lineage between, you know, Chinese, you know, blah blah blah, and Portuguese tiles," and people went absolutely nuts. You know, like, um, and, you know, she eventually messaged me and she said, "Look, you know, I didn't realize that this was what was going to happen. You know." And I said to her, I said, listen, just, you know, just ignore it. I mean, these people don't have a clue what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Just ignore it completely. But eventually, I just was like, I'll just switch off the comments for it. Like, it's just not worth it. You know what I mean? It's not worth putting all that out there. But it's also interesting. It's like, this person's an expert.
Yeah,
They know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? That's another thing I've noticed on social media. Everybody is an expert.
Yeah,
Everybody.
it's a modern phenomenon, isn't it? It's like science go out the window, and like, what I think is more important than what anybody thinks. It's like
everybody's an expert on everything.
Yeah,
and nobody knows anything.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know where people have the time to write so many comments. Like
that's true. That's another one as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the flat Earth thing is always a very funny one. Like the like.
I went out with a girl.
Don't tell me you believe in flat Earth, right?
I went out with a girl once. I went out with a girl once who was a flat earther. It was an interesting experience.
The fell flat, did it? Oh, boom, boom.
It's interesting what you can put up with,
Yeah, well, no, that reminds me. The wind turbines that are dotted all over the world. Really, they're supposed to generate electricity, right?
Yeah.
So I went out with a girl once, and she said, "No, because Portugal and especially in the Algarve is so hot, they're fans." And I was like, "What do you mean they're fans?" He said, "Yeah, they turn them on to cool everybody down because it gets too hot around here." And I said, "You're joking, right? They're wind generators, wind turbines to create electricity." No. You're not gonna try to convince me that they are fans. Look at the household fan. You have a fan in the house, and that blows air to cool you down. It's the same thing. It's cooling down the land. You wouldn't have.
Hey, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, very funny one. Right, man. Stephen, I think we should wrap it up there. I think it's been an absolutely amazing podcast, and really, I think we should do another one soon. And
sure. I think we were just getting into conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, don't get me on
proper podcast realm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Stephen, tell me, like, where can people follow you? And we talked a lot about your Instagram and YouTube. And what I'll do is I'll leave all the notes in the links in the show notes, and also on the website.
The main place where people should enjoy our full videos is on our YouTube, which is YouTube. / People of Lisbon. But then if people want to see these super controversial Instagram posts are real, just go to it's just People Lisbon on Instagram, instagram.com / People Lisbon. And then you'll see the beautiful photographs by Rita, which we post there. But if you go onto the Reels section, I try and post a new reel every single day. And you should have some, it's interesting. Look in the comments of these reels, and you'll see the real.
And leave a few of your own comments, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Say again. My headphone just fell out there. Say again.
No, wait. And that's people can go there and leave their own comments, and let's see if we can create some people to combat the negative. Let's have a lot of people leaving positive comments, please. Let's positivity.
I won't be reading them one way or the other, so it makes no difference.
Yeah. Right. So what I'll do is I'll leave the links on in the show notes of the episodes. This will go out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and YouTube Podcasts. The links will also be available on the website podcastportugal.com. I want to say a big thanks again to the music of our podcast by Band of Four. And thank you for their support. Do you want to say thank you to anybody or your supporters or sponsors of People of Lisbon?
I just want to say thank you to Jesus and that's all I can. And good stuff, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, spots are not upset. I just need some time, some focusing. I got the pen, I got the sheet, I got my plan, I got my screen. Someone tell me, please, the reasoning. The start.